continuation of the Civilization formula, evolution rather than invention. I don't think Civilization really needs any introduction, as it's practically as old as I am, but it is the 4X game in many ways. It's a turn-based strategy game in which you control one of the many well-known nations and attempt to lead them to world domination. There are some scenarios to try out, but these are usually something that arrive with the DLC and expansion packs later through the game's lifetime. The main body of the content is creating randomly generated worlds, and from then on, the story is your own. Now, this isn't intended to be an in-depth review of the strategies and fine workings, as I tend to play Civilization fairly casually, so this will be an overview of the way the game works and some of the things I've started to notice from that perspective. It may not be enough for some Civilization aficionados. The closest comparison in the series to Civ 6 is 5, as you might expect. It has the same hex-style grid and the same slightly cartoony graphical style. I considered Civ 5 to be closer to the Revolution spin-off for the consoles and handhelds in many ways, as it simplified the gameplay considerably. Not necessarily a bad thing, as it made it very easy to play it casually. Civ 6 takes off from the same point and adds some of the complexity back in, but in a slightly different way. Two of the biggest changes are the addition of a second research tree in the form of civics, and cities now need to build districts in order to access some of the buildings. These can take a couple of games to get your head around using them to full effect, but there's enough guidance available that you really can't go wrong. The new civics tech tree is a card-based system which will give you a variety of different boosts to your nation and can be changed anytime you research a new one for free, or you can also pay to change them manually. These boosts range from things like reducing military maintenance costs to getting wonder production boosts. You can only have a certain number of cards in your set at any one time, and these can be increased by switching to different government styles, which also have different boosts, or by building some of the wonders in the late game. There are 3 different types of card: military, economy and diplomacy, but there's also a wildcard section where you can play any of the 3 mentioned. The main uses I've found for these is balancing out some of the happiness in your nation and adjusting to the frequent and unrelenting wars which seem to happen all the time, but I'll get back to that later. The research side of the civics tree is almost identical to the science tech tree as seen in previous games. Districts is the other big change to the game. In previous titles, all of your buildings resided within your city and you could build anything you wanted, within reason of course. But in Civilization 6 you can build a few of the most common buildings like granaries and monuments in the main body, and everything else must be done in a district. The districts are all themed, so you have ones like the campus in which you can build things like libraries and universities, all of your science style buildings, and others like the encampment where you build barracks and military boosting buildings. There are about 10 different types in total. The reason this complicates things slightly is because firstly you're limited to a certain number of districts dependent on the size of your city, but also because they're built on the land surrounding the city and take the place of worker improvements. This means you have to choose carefully where you put each of them. They can also be pillaged by barbarians and warring civilizations, so keeping them safe is a priority, and I also provide part of the requirement for a vast majority of the wonders, which also take up a hex of space. Some wonders must be adjacent to certain districts and tiles, so it's very useful to leave space around them for the future. But I do have several problems with Civ 6 as well. As is often the case when a new one comes out, there are a number of flaws, bugs and balancing issues which can take a while to iron out. This time around they don't make the game unplayable, but they can be very frustrating. The first of these problems is the UI is awkward to use and clumsy. The activities which appear on the right hand side don't always pop up when you hover over them. The game will sometimes select a different unit while you're in the middle of something and you end up sending your builder to the other side of the world, wasting valuable turn time. There are many more of these as well, but these are the UI problems causing me the most annoyance at the moment. Secondly, the other civilizations are impossible to please. Every game I try and keep them on my side, but even if they're a declared friend, they will sometimes just stab you in the back and declare war at the drop of a hat. To the point where you have to build a military because war is unavoidable, which has its positives and negatives, but when you get penalised for being a warmonger even though they declared war on you, it's stupid to say the least. The only truly game-breaking issue that I found is one of my saves is stuck with a crash to desktop on the next turn. So that was about 10 hours of game time wasted on a game which I was about 20 turns away from winning. I'm still hoping a patch will come out that will allow me to complete that game. That all being said, Civilization 6 is once again a time sink which once you're stuck in you can't pull yourself away, and you keep pressing next turn even though you had planned to do useful things with your day. I've sunk nearly 60 hours into it already and it only came out a month ago. I can't see myself even stopping for a little while either. It does have its fair share of problems, but it's such a colossal amount of fun that I can't help but forgive it. It's one that leaves me with stories about amusing religion spreading across the world, never-ending wars involving Gandhi, and not sharing coffee with the Aztecs because they won't stop spreading Judaism in your country. It's an interesting one to recommend because really, it's just another Civ game. It's different, but it's entirely the same. All I can really say is that I'm finding it hugely entertaining, and I can't help but sink more hours into it than I should do on a daily basis. I wasn't even intending on reviewing it, but I haven't had the time to finish other games because of the amount of time I've spent playing Civ.